Hello. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I know some people are still trickling in, but for the sake of everyone that is here on time, we're going to go ahead and get started. So on behalf of the village, I just want to thank everyone for coming out this evening for this public forum of the SID Advisory Committee. First, I also want to thank SOPAC for hosting this evening, and particularly for Laura Vesey from SOPAC, who helps with the logistics and setting up this room on such short notice. There was a drama camp in this room just about an hour ago, and they transformed it into this meeting room, so thank her and SOPAC for their help with that. My name is Michael Goldberg. I'm a member of the South Orange Board of Trustees, and along with Mark Rosner, are two of the trustee liaisons to this committee. So before we get started, I just want to take a moment to provide a real brief background on the committee and how we came to tonight's meeting. Last summer, a number of property owners approached the village expressing some very strong concerns they had with the state of the downtown. They provided us a stack of literally hundreds of photographs of litter, poorly maintained properties, and infrastructure issues throughout the entire downtown that they felt needed to be addressed. After discussing with them and with the rest of the Board of Trustees at several public meetings, a decision was made to create a committee to explore the feasibility of creating an improvement district to help address these concerns. A resolution which established a Special Improvement District Advisory Committee, which consisted of key stakeholders from Main Street, the Parking Authority, the village, and most importantly, business and property owners, was passed in January of this year, and solicitations for volunteers to participate in this committee were put out. The committee was formed, as folks you see in front of you, and certainly I also want to acknowledge all the hard work and effort they've been putting in over the past several months. They're all volunteers, they're all devoting their time to be here tonight and over the past several months, so we certainly appreciate their efforts. The committee has met starting in April 6th and met every 2 weeks since then to explore this idea in depth. The meeting tonight is to share with all of you what an improvement district is in general. We have a couple guests that are going to share some information with everybody, as well as the committee is going to share what their findings have been to date with respect to South Orange specifically. But most importantly, the meeting tonight is to hear your input and your feedback and get your questions answered directly from the stakeholders in this process, who are business owners, property owners, as well as residents in town, all of whom, I think we can agree, want nothing more than a strong and vibrant downtown. So with that, I just want to turn it over to the chairperson of the committee, Robin Fields, who is the owner of Robin Ross, and is the chairperson of the committee, and she'll take us through the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I just want to say on behalf of the committee, thank you all for coming out tonight. We really appreciate your attendance. I do want to introduce the committee. We've all been working very hard, and I'm just going to go in order here from the end. So we have John Morose, our village administrator. Jeff DeBowie, who is our parking authority representative, and he's also a 19-year resident of South Orange. We have Alan Noel, who is a 15-year business owner of a certified public accounting firm in South Orange and a 20-year South Orange resident. We just had walk in, two of our representatives were outside of the committee. Jared Hutter, he is a representative of Waynco, which is a partnership that owns and manages 75 South Orange Avenue. Michael Auer is one of our Main Street representatives. He has been on the Main Street board since 2003. He's a 24-year resident of South Orange, and he is also a residential real estate agent. Next, we have Kyle McLaughlin, and Kyle is also another Main Street representative. He has been on the board for 5 years at Main Street. He is an employee of a South Orange business, a second-floor South Orange business, and he is a 6-year resident of South Orange. Carol Lowy. Carol owns Housing and Community Development Services at 4 Sloane Street. She represents 2 through 4 South Orange Avenue, a property that's owned by her husband, Ted Lowy. Denise Brayfelder, who is co-owner of 14 South Orange Avenue and 68 Rose Avenue in South Orange. She's also president for Communication for Social Change Consortium, a global nonprofit organization with offices in South Orange. And she's a 28-year resident in South Orange. Then behind me, we have Michael Goldberg, who you just met, who is our BOT representative, and Mark Rosner, who I hope you can see is also behind me, the other BOT representative. And I think that's everybody. everybody. We also have two special guests tonight that will be introduced momentarily, but I'd like to turn it over to Denise Brayfelder. She, Carol Lowy, and Michael Auer will serve tonight as our moderators, and she will take you through the next part of our program.
Thanks, Robin. I actually don't like stands. So we're going to try to have a well-moderated, engaging forum. We're going to do our best today to try to make sure that all viewpoints are heard, that want to be heard. We're actually going to we've worked hard on the agenda to minimize the presentations as much as we can to allow adequate time for public comment and questions. So what I will do now is just go through the format. We're going to first hear from Jeff Mueller, who is the State Director of Main Street, New Jersey, and the Improvement District program, and that will be followed by Tom Lonergan, who is the Executive Director of Montclair SID. So we have the philosophy, the policy of SIDS, followed by a specific example in Montclair. I'd like to just go through quickly with you. On the back of your program are some suggested rules. Rules is a little bit strong, guidelines maybe, that we suggest we use for this forum, that basically will make sure that we respect the diversity of opinions and make sure that everybody that wants to be heard can be heard. So I ask you to please take a quick minute to look at this, and if, you know, like in the movies, if your cell phone is not off, now is the time to turn it off, because we really want to kind of make sure that we get in and we're out of here as close as possible to 10 o'clock. We're going to have the overall philosophy presentation, Tom's specific example from Montclair, and then we'll have a panel of 3 committee members who are going to go through the South Orange specifics, the process, what the potential district would look like, and the financing and illustrative budget for a potential South Orange SID. So that's pretty much our format. We will then, at that point, have a question and answer and comment period, which will allow those of you in the audience to have your comments or questions heard. We ask you, because we don't have a wireless mic, if you want to speak, Ben is back here, Ben Salmon, and just come to the microphone, and Ben will help arrange and engage the people that want to speak. I think that's about it for now.
Denise,
yes.
I'm sorry. I missed one person, Ben Salmon. He's with the here. I apologize. Ben Salmon's also part of our committee. He's just our technical advisor right now, and he is at 19 South Orange Avenue. He owns Kitchen Olive. I apologize, Ben. I'm really sorry.
Thank you. Thanks, Robin. A couple other things. There are maps in 3 locations in the room. On this second exit door on my left, on the pole here, right by the speaker, and on the table in the back, and the map has the streets outlined of the potential special improvement district. We also would point out that you've already seen a comment card. If you don't have a chance to verbalize your question or comment, please write it down. They will be put in before you leave, put it in the box by the table. We'll have 2 committee members standing there to make sure. This is the banner right out here, as Ben demonstrates. Put it into the box there, and the comments and questions will be responded to via the South Orange Downtown website. Okay? All right, let's get going. And Jeff,
sure. Thank you. I'm going to put the mic in here. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Quick question. Who all here is a South Orange resident? Okay, great. Who owns commercial property in South Orange? Okay, excellent. Who owns a business in South Orange? Excellent. Elected appointed official in South Orange? Okay, Mets fans? No, great. Okay. My job is to give a brief 15-minute overview about improvement districts in New Jersey and kind of tied into as it relates to South Orange, and Tom will follow me with details from the Montclair experience. I only begrudge you with the simple fact that at the end of the presentation, hopefully it's an incentive for paying attention, I will include a very cute photo of my 9-month daughter, old daughter, who I have not seen since like 7 o'clock this morning. So that's just my one little thing to begrudge with it. Next man. I'm not a rocket scientist, but I do have about 20 years of community and economic development experience, about 15 of which in New Jersey, specifically working with downtown revitalization Main Street programs, improvement districts. These are all types of modalities and ways of doing downtown revitalization. Downtown revitalization itself is not a rocket science. It is kind of a science. It's a process that requires commitment. It's a process that requires coordination. It's a process that requires resources, time, talent, and treasure. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. What I'm going to do tonight is provide you sort of by the numbers, an overview of improvement districts and downtown management, again, in that 3-15-minute time frame. Okay, first numbers. 2.1 billion, 34,976,000. Those are pretty cool numbers, right? You want to guess what they are? Well, there are federal, state, county grants that are available to help you with your downtown revitalization and management efforts right now in your dreams. They don't exist. Okay, there's no money out there for this kind of stuff that's going to come from on high. There's no silver bullet. There's no state, federal, county, and probably even not very much local money that can be dedicated into making your downtown be all that it can be. Now, that's really important to know because improvement districts are a modality that can leverage private and public sector resources to help you get the job done for downtown South Orange or any downtown. Next number. 576? I thought it was 66. Okay, let me change. 566 municipalities in New Jersey. Everyone knows that, right? More municipalities per square mile than any other state in the country. Next number. 101. That's the number of downtown management efforts, organizations, districts in New Jersey. So 566 municipalities, 101 downtown management programs and efforts in New Jersey collectively. Next number. 82. That's the number of that 101 that are using the modality or the technique of having an improvement district and assessment district. We're going to explain that briefly. Which means, next number, 81% of the downtown management efforts in New Jersey are in part or mostly wholly funded through improvement districts. So it's a pretty common thing. Now, so there are 82 improvement districts in 65 municipalities, over 18 counties. So there are only 3 counties that don't have any improvement districts whatsoever. For what it's worth, Jersey City and Woodbridge, most in our region here, have 4 each within those municipal boundaries. Essex County itself leads the way in the state with actually 13 improvement districts currently. There are 72 district management corporations in the state. The average budget is around $340,000. And the budget ranges anywhere from $30,000 up to like $4.7 million. That's at the city, in case you're wondering. They're definitely an outlier there. Let's talk about what improvement districts are. This is the non-number slide portion of the presentation. They're geographically defined assessment districts. So these maps that they're showing you are potential geographic definitions, I guess, of the potential district in South Orange. They're created by municipal ordinance. It is a municipal power that has been granted by the state of New Jersey since 1989 for municipalities to implement these improvement districts. It's wholly a municipal function. They have an annual municipal budget approval. That means every year the municipality has to approve the improvement district's budget. It's run by a district management corporation, or also known as a DMC for short. Interesting, run DMC for those of you who heard that. With a board made up of public and private stakeholders. Now, I should say private and public stakeholders. And I say private and public because, as has been alluded to before, the private sector really leads these things. Okay, the public sector is a key partner, but the private sector leads. Next slide. District Management Corporation's DMC does a couple of things. It provides professional management of and for the district, not unlike, say, a mall manager. It meets the broad goals of the state legislation, which are, again, broad goals about downtown management for revitalization. In that defined district, it augments, it does not replace municipal services. That's part of the state law. Okay, and it raises, and ultimately it works to raise and maintain the economic, physical, social, and civic value of that district. Those are the 4 values that go into a healthy district. I'm probably going to mention that number again. Next slide. There we go. Great. So, why is this the preferred funding mechanism in New Jersey? You guys are really stoked. It's the Sopranos. We can't make fun of ourselves in New Jersey, what can we? So why is this the preferred funding mechanism in New Jersey, and in fact the United States and the world for these kind of efforts? It's because it works. Everyone has skin in the game. It's the same method in the commercial arena that a mall or a shopping center uses. It It provides, they have common area maintenance fees, CAMs, otherwise known in the business. And basically, these are assessments on all the businesses and properties within those areas, although in the mall's case, it's all owned by one property owner. And those monies go to raise the civic, economic, social, and physical value of that mall or of that shopping center. Likewise, if you want to look at it from the residential perspective, a condo association, there's a condo fee, right? Condo fee pays for things like the landscaping of the general area, right? It also keeps the pool open on a day like today and staffed with a lifeguard. And obviously, we'd certainly like to be in that pool right now. In any case, this is something that is not abnormal or atypical. It's something that's existed in America on the private side since the 1950s in so many levels, both residential and commercial. But in this kind of concept where we have a downtown, this is the only mechanism we have to do this. Okay, and what does it all do? It strives to give your district, whatever your district is, a present economic value that is growing incrementally and ultimately a future return on investment for your property owners, for your business owners, for your residents that are literally in the district, but also everyone who's around the district. Because if the core of your community is thriving, it brings the rest of your community up with it. It increases your residential property values, it provides more rateables to the municipality, creates a better quality of life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, there are, next slide, 4 values, economic, civic, social, and physical, that you need to work to raise that creates basically community progress, if you will, through downtown management. Next slide. Again, it's no accident how this works. It doesn't happen by accident. Downtowns don't just blossom like this overnight. They also didn't decline overnight either. Obviously, South Orange has been working on downtown revitalization for almost 2 decades now, and it's an ongoing process. So many towns are in that process with you as well. Ultimately, though, South Orange, interestingly enough, has a proactive history of working for the community benefit through the leveraging of joint assets and funding. And to that, I'm going to give you, next slide, 3 or 4 South Orange facts. These are from the internet, if you will, Wikipedia, South Orange, various South Orange websites, even the Montrose Historic Society in South Orange. So South Orange has a long history of public-private partnerships and investing in things that matter, often with state government or colonial government support if you want to go way back. So in the 1705, the road statutes that pre-existed the state of New Jersey, but the territory of New Jersey, required landowners to maintain the roads in front of their property. It's basically an assessment. In the 1800s, South Orange, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this, witnessed a series of debates regarding the transition from sperm whale oil to natural gas for its lamps. You probably know this, right? And we know how that turned out. You guys have gas lamps, and it's one of the great monikers of the community. It's something you're very well known for. In fact, you're the one community, the largest, most gas lamps in any community, single community in New Jersey. Actually, 50% of all the gas lamps in New Jersey are in South Orange, for what it's worth. In 1872, the state, now South Orange was incorporated per se, and I believe 1869, correct me if I'm wrong, but in 1872, the village was actually given authorization by the state to levy these things called taxes and borrow money. And this went to pay for things like actually creating the roads and sort of defining the sidewalks and laying out the grid of the municipality, as well as building something like the city hall or the village hall. So that was a collective action for this community progress. And lastly, the last example, before, the library. A referendum was held on April 27, 1926, this is a quote, and citizens voted 10-1 in favor of the town taking over the former privately run library and turning it into a public library and providing all the economic support for that. It then became known as South Orange Public Library, and it stands right up the street right there now today, obviously, expanded and moved and all that. So these are examples of community progress benefiting the community of stakeholders in South Orange that have been around for 100, 200 years. Improvement district is a modality for community progress. It's specifically focused on your downtown. So to sum up, I think this is almost the last slide, the core points. Improvement districts, if they're well managed and well run, and certainly would be in South Orange, they're locally empowered. It's locally driven by local stakeholders. It's a municipal ordinance that creates them. They're stakeholder driven. Again, it's the public and private sector working together, the residents, the business owners, the property owners working together to better the downtown and therefore better the value of everyone's assets in the entire town. It is in fact asset based. It builds on the assets that you have in South Orange, not what you don't have. So the economics that you have that are positive builds on that. The train station, all of your other core assets, SOPAC itself, you build on that to grow your downtown and your district, and ultimately it's agreement-oriented, not disagreement-oriented. So what it is about is, it's about what we can agree on, not what we disagree on. The fact is, we're not all going to agree on 100% of what we want for downtown South Orange, but we could probably safely agree on 75 to 80% of what we agree on. That's what this focuses on. I think, lastly, yeah, there's a gratuitous free picture of my daughter. Thank you very much for listening. I'll be waiting for questions. Thank you.
I suppose it's my turn. No pictures of children, not yet. My name is Tom Lonergan. I'm the director of Montclair's Business Improvement District, specifically the Montclair Center Business Improvement District. And I think I'm here because 10 years ago, property owners and business owners in downtown Montclair assembled, very similarly to you have, exactly 10 years ago actually, to debate whether or not it's time to create a bid along Bloomfield Avenue and the ancillary streets downtown. Montclair has a pretty terrific reputation today. It's the place, not to say that South Orange certainly does, but it has established itself a reputation as the place to go, particularly for some pretty neat shopping, definitely dining. The Art Museum's been around a while, but the Wellmont Theater's been its newest addition. And over the last couple of years, we've been fortunate to secure places like Urban Outfitters, Anthropology, Red Mango, Starbucks, but who doesn't? Starbucks. But as for the rest, these are places now that we somewhat take for granted that we have them in our community, and they've been a great boon for us. But 10 years ago, this was not the case. For those of you who have been here a long time, Montclair had a very different reputation, at least in downtown. It's always been a terrific community in which to live, and many years ago it had a very well-known downtown as well. But for many decades, it fell into a state of disrepair. Vacancies skyrocketed, perceptions of it were on the decline for a very long time. Maintenance issues ruled the day. It was falling by the wayside. It had become yet another victim of suburbanization and regional malls that had become the place where people were going for their shopping and other needs. A resolute group of property and business owners downtown got together in the late 90s. They didn't have a formal Main Street organization, but they created an organization called the MDA, the Montclair Downtown Alliance. It's a small group of business and property owners who are actually still there in town, but maybe 4 or 5 in person. They formed together to identify problems and bring them to the town's attention and try to get Public Works to address some of them and try to get police to address other ones and try to bring attention to the good things, there were some, that were down there and try to market Montclair. But time and forces were their enemy, and they realized by 2001 they needed to do something a little bit more formally to turn the tide and to bring back Montclair the way they knew it long ago. By early 2001, they formed a SID, or BID as we call it up there, they're interchangeable, steering committee to talk about the idea of creating a business improvement district along Bloomfield Avenue, Church Street, Glenridge Avenue, and a few of the ancillary streets between the Art Museum and the Glenridge border. It's a long district, almost 1.5 miles from end to end, east to west. Very narrow, but very long, like me. Almost 270 properties included in there, and it's safe to say that during the initial part of the conversations, there were a lot of people who did not want it. They did not like the idea of having to spend any more money on services and marketing and other things that were promised to them that would come with the bid. Little by little, opinions changed on that. Naysayers became supporters. They saw the benefits of the bid, and by early 2002, the bid was formally established. In April 2002 by Montclair Municipal Council. We're now going on 10 years. And during that time, I think one of the things that they have found most alluring about the bid concept is the fact that they can make it what they want. Meaning they run it, they rule it. They have a board of directors comprised of property owners and business owners and municipal leaders and people representative of various agencies and the residents of the downtown district. And every year that board can change, and every year the agenda changes. And if they want to increase the budget to do extra things, they can. And if they want to decrease the budget, exactly, they can do that as well. They choose the priorities that matter to them as a district. Initially, for the first couple of years, there was a mantra on the board, cleaning house before inviting guests. Downtown Montclair was in desperate need of maintenance and physical improvements. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent on benches and trash cans and bus shelters and bike racks and all sorts of streetscape amenities. They hired a full-time maintenance crew that now works, 2 members work 6 days a week. There's a green machine, one of those sidewalk cleaning machines that's out there with one other member, and they clean almost 2 miles of road every single day and sidewalk. Curb lines, I shouldn't say, not road, but they're not out there. Special events started at the beginning, they've expanded through the years. We've gone from simply sidewalk sales and an occasional event here to festivals and art walks and restaurant weeks and a variety of other things that continue to evolve as times change. In 2004, the bid paid for a streetscape enhancement study where we hired an urban audit firm that came in and said, these are some reasonably affordable ways that you could improve your downtown and make it what you're looking for it to be. And perhaps most recently you've seen the South Park Street project. Love or hate it, it's getting off the ground soon. And this came as an initiative of the bid, emphasizing the need for a true town center. The bid went, and with the assistance of the Main Street program, was able to secure a zero interest loan from the state, which helped sell it to the municipality. It's not only a great project, but a fiscally responsible one as well. And we continue to make plans like that for other areas of the downtown up to this minute. By and large, it's not to say there aren't still people who say we wish we weren't paying an additional assessment. They are in the minority. By and large, they've seen the benefits, and they realize that the anthropologies and the urban outfitters that have settled downtown haven't come exclusively because of the bid, but we certainly helped it along. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeff and Tom. That's a great job, and within the time limits. This is fabulous. We're now going to go to a 3-person panel of the committee members of South Orange Improvement District Advisory Committee. So maybe you guys are together. Jeff, are you okay here? You want to switch between one of us? Maybe stay at the table. And they will introduce themselves, by the way.
Good evening. Again, my name is Alan Noel, and for the past 15 years, I've owned and operated a small accounting practice here in downtown South Orange. My job tonight is to provide a somewhat an overview of the proposed district. As the committee met, one of the things that we wanted to do was define the area that would serve as the special improvement district if South Orange were to decide to implement such a program. The committee decided that to be most effective, we would limit it to the central business district. That area has been defined as the area stemming from the center part of the downtown, eastward up through the Provident Bank building, westward down South Orange Avenue, up to the Verizon building, the business areas down Church Street, the area of Irvington Avenue up to the restaurant on Academy, and somewhat of some of the properties on Prospect. Would also include the properties on Valley Street up to and including the Propets building, all Sloan Street, and Vokes Avenue up to, I believe, Taylor Street. If you go to the back of the room or all around the room, you will see specific areas outlined on the map. As we were discussing the district, the area, it was not our intention to specifically exclude any of the other business areas here in town. In fact, the committee did talk about expanding the area to encompass the business properties on Irvington Avenue and some properties that are further down on Valley Street. However, the committee recognized that those areas have unique needs, and the objective is to have a district management corporation controlling or work with an area that would be easily managed. The area that we define has particularly unique needs, and we believe that the idea of keeping it within a small contiguous area would allow the management company to specifically address those needs within that community. Only those properties that fall within the business district would be subject to the assessment. Any residential properties within the district that were comprised of 2 or less residential units would be excluded from the assessment. Tax exempt entities would be excluded from the assessment. That is, houses of worship, Jet Street houses in particular, they would not be included in the assessment. Those properties with mixed use, say commercial, the commercial activities on the bottom and some residential on top, they would be given an assessment. The services that are going to be provided by the District Management Corporation are going to be geared specifically to the needs of the businesses that fall within the district. However, if successful, it is believed that any of the other surrounding businesses within South Orange would also receive some of the benefits as any increased business or activity that occur here in downtown area. With that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Colin McLaughlin, who will talk specifically about the budget, the model budget, and the other items in the district.
Thanks, Tom. My name is Tom McLaughlin. As Robin said earlier, I'm a Main Street representative on the City Advisory Committee and a multi-year resident of South Orange, in addition to being an employee of the 7-Foot business. The budget that we're about to walk you through has a lot of details. You're going to see a couple spreadsheets up on the screen. I know it's hard for you guys to read, but hopefully you'll be able to get the picture of what we're looking at. We opted to go for kind of a multi-year approach to creating a model to give an illustration of what an improvement district in South Orange could look like. This is not saying that these numbers on the screen that you're going to see tonight are what would happen or what will happen, but they're a pretty good explanation of what the needs in South Orange are and what the financial assets that we contribute to them would go towards improving and how that assessment would be spent. A couple things to keep in mind of what you're looking at is the budget that you're going to see up here tonight is a model, and the reality is if an improvement district were to be created, the board of that improvement district, which would be comprised primarily of private business and property owners and other key downtown stakeholders, would be the body on a yearly basis to determine that budget. And as Tom and Jeff said earlier, the budget can fluctuate up or down depending on the priorities and needs of the downtown and what they see as the key objectives on a year-to-year basis. The other important things to realize: this budget was not created in a vacuum. Numerous budgets from other Main Street communities and other improvement district communities in New Jersey were considered, as well as the budgets of Main Street South Orange, and also taking into picture the contributions from the village. We were given a document by John Gross, our village administrator, outlining funds that the village spends on downtown cleanup that they'd be willing to contract with the improvement district to manage those, and the improvement district more reasonably could probably manage those a little bit more effectively and efficiently. So The other thing to see is the reason we opted for a 5-year approach is that the assessments will start low in the beginning as the business owner and property owner board takes hold and gets their footing, and as the organization reaches maturity, the assessment increases and levels off. You'll see that there are, it's a very low assessment in the initial years, and as the organization reaches maturity in years 3, 4, and 5, the assessment stops its annual large increases and kind of levels off. Once the full portfolio of marketing, advertising, and downtown cleanup and services, in addition to the other, promotions, events, and economic development activities are kind of reaching their full potential. I'm going to go to the next slide. We'll talk to the income really fast. And I'm going to go through this quickly. Feel free to ask questions during your question and answer period, which is coming up next. The income portion of the budget assumes that the improvement district, as has been expressed by village elected officials, would take over potentially the Main Street contract for downtown services that is provided currently in the amount of $50,000 per annum. And the $100,000 number in annual income that you're seeing there below is an approximation of what the village will be providing to the improvement district in exchange for downtown cleanup and management services. It's important to note that improvement districts have a legal, aren't allowed to legally take services from the town. Towns aren't allowed to assign services to the improvement district without providing the funding for them. So if an improvement district were enacted, the town couldn't all up and say that, oh, the improvement district will take over your downtown cleanup services, we're backing out, without providing the amount of money that they spend on those services on a yearly basis. The fact of the matter is, and you'll see this in the expense portion of the budget, is that due to the improvement district's ability to operate outside of union contracts and pensions and government contracts and bureaucracy and oversight, that the $100,000 that the village spends on cleanup could be spent and amplified at a much more exponential level from a nonprofit perspective than a government perspective. You'll see other line items there. The Fronts program is currently money that's available to Main Street from the village for design facade renovations. I see many of you in the room who have them. And hopefully that program will continue until that money, which is from the Affinity Card program, runs out. And assessments, you'll see, is the key line item there, number 4, starting off at $36,000 for the entire district, based on property valuation. Jeff will talk a little bit more about that later. Increases as objectives and maturity of the organization increases to year 1, 2, and 3, and then levels off in 4 and 5. Grant-based projects and promotions are considered kind of washout line items. The money that comes in is the money that's spent on them. So revenue generated from events and sponsorships is being reinvested in spending on promotions in downtown, things like restaurant week and sidewalk sales and things that you heard Tom talk about earlier. And then contributions are resident donations and any other contributions that are achieved through the organization. It's a pretty low figure compared to what other business improvement districts and Main Street communities are taking in, assuming that it would take an organization some time to develop their donor base. I'm going to go to the next slide then. On the admin expenses, there's both admin and operating expenses. The admin expenses include the salary of a full-time executive director who would report to the business and property owner board of the improvement district of the Downtown Management Corporation, with a starting salary of $65,000 a year, which is very congruent with other improvement districts in the state of New Jersey. You'll see that taxes and benefits are in a separate line item below, health insurance and standard payroll taxes. And then we chose, rather than giving higher salaries, to include a line item for goal-based incentives, which would allow the property and business owner board to make incentives available to their employees based on achieving certain performance benchmarks that board would set forth. If certain things were achieved based on their annual reviews, then additional money could be provided as a bonus, rather than guaranteeing them that money up front. They'd be able to earn it on a yearly basis depending on their performance. Which brings the total salary line item to $83,000 in the first year. Year 2 sees a potential hiring of a PR and marketing manager, which would be a second full-time employee to focus on events and promotions, public relations and marketing for the town. As the organization is fully set up and reaching maturity, and they'll be able to support a second employee who can focus on an expanding PR and marketing budget. The office expenses are very standard below, based on South Orange rents and other expenses for running it. Now, it's important to keep in mind that a potential in-kind contribution from a South Orange property owner who wanted to donate office space could almost effectively make this line item half of what it currently is. We'll go on to the next slide. The operating expenses are by far above the meat of the improvement district. We opted to go for a 5-year approach because we wanted to make sure that this was a realistic picture and that you were able to see how an improvement district would start, and what the increases would be on a yearly basis. And keep in mind, again, these are all an illustration of what it could look like. In year one, you'll see, in the first couple of years, actually, you'll see lower budgets for advertising and marketing, and growing budgets for promotions and economic development as the organization picks a board, staff gets settled in, and the initial focus on cleanup is going successful. Then more money is allocated towards promoting and marketing. And just as Tom said earlier, want to make sure you clean your house before you invite the guests over, which sees our $60,000 allocation in year one for part-time ambassador cleanup services. Rather than hiring full-time employees who have to be salaried and have benefits, we felt that money could be appropriated more effectively towards part-time cleanup crews who could be, whose hours could be leveraged on a seasonal basis to engage in attacking the town with an aggressive cleanup program in the early years, and then working on capital and structural improvements and planting beautification initiatives in further years. The budget also allocates money for contract cleanup services, which could be used to contract landscapers and additional things that are above and beyond the capacity of those employees to provide kind of higher level and long-term improvement programs on the cleanup and beautification front. So grant-based programs is assuming that money received from federal and state grants and other private community grants will be able to be leveraged towards downtown beautification, streetscaping, wayfinding, and other programs to use that funding effectively, and that's a revenue neutral income and outflow. And downtown decor is not only holiday decorations, which the village does spend a portion of money on. There's also potential for village contribution there, but also streetscaping, benches and trash cans and the other things that are necessary, wayfinding and signage to keep our downtown looking the way we want it to. You'll see that as the years go on, the total operating expenses certainly increase, and in each year, operating expenses are lower than the salaries that are spent on the administrative. But it's really important to recognize too that the executive director and the potential PR marketing manager down the road are truly, their salaries could be leveraged and split up over each of these line items. The economic development activities, promotions, and marketing, and all of the design and cleanup programs are being supervised by the full-time employees, and the full-time employees are working at the will and supervision of a board that's comprised primarily of business and property owners. So looking at the salaries and the admins as overhead versus operating expenses is really a narrow way to kind of evaluate the budget. It's important to see that the professional man hours that are being put into downtown redevelopment initiatives are just as valuable as the money that's spent on buying flowers and benches. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, who's going to talk kind of about the way that the assessment formula is calculated, about how we are basing those assessments, and we've got some examples for you of what some well-known properties in town would be assessed based on this current model budget.
Good evening. I'm Jeff DeBose. I'm the Parking Authority representative on the committee. Welcome everyone this evening. So the big question after you've looked at the numbers behind me is, what is it going to cost me? So we thought about that. We had to look at the different methods that the assessment is calculated throughout the communities that are using improvement districts in New Jersey. And there are 4 methods that are used. One is based on the assessed value, which is the most common. About 85% of the communities that have improvement districts base the assessment on assessed value, tax assessed value. There's also linear footage, which is used in about 5% of the communities, square footage about 3% of the communities, and a flat fee in about 5% of the communities. So we figured it was to give a fair representation for this evening's presentation based on these numbers that are in draft form. We think it's best to use the assessed value. So we've looked at some properties throughout, larger properties, smaller properties, medium properties, just to give you an idea what it's going to cost you if you're in one of those properties. So based on the year one, on the assessed value, okay, it's the total value of the property. It's approximately 30 cents per $1,000. So on $1 million property, you're talking about $300 for the first year of assessment. An easy way to do that, if you don't know what the assessed value of your property is, it's about $11 per 1,000 of your taxes. So if you're paying $10,000 a year in property taxes, figure $110. And that will obviously increase as the budget goes up, as the improvement district expands, takes on more responsibility, and wants to increase the scope of their involvement in the town. Obviously, the cost goes up. And going out the second year, it about doubles, and going finally with the draft budget in year 5, you can kind of estimate it's about $1 per the assessed value. So on a $1 million property, it's about $1,000 in assessment for the improvement district, or on a tax basis, about $40 per tax assessment, per $1,000 of tax assessment. Or if you're paying $10,000 in taxes, about $400. Just one of the towns, Highland Park, that has a bid, their assessment is $4 per thousand, $157,000 budget. Another thing, okay, 2 of the properties comprise 25% of the improvement district in South Orange, specifically 76 South Orange Avenue, the big buildings, and also the Avenue property on those. They're 25% of the assessment. And it's important to keep in mind that there are a lot of projects, hopefully will get developed soon, will buy this property that are in the improvement district, and that will create more ratables and I guess ease the burden and make a stronger improvement district. Just to pick out a couple of properties that people would know, if we looked at the, let's look at 76 South Orange Avenue. In year 1, their assessment would be approximately $4,300, going up to year 5, about $14,000. Looking at something like Rite Aid, year 1, at $950. Year 5 goes up to about $3,200. Let's look at Brian's Restaurant. In year 1, it's estimated about $120, going up to $400 in year 5. And let's take Giorgio's on Dulce Avenue. It's about $300 in year 1, going up to about $1,100 in year 5 assessment. Thank you.
So one last thing too, is important to note that the assessments are levied on the property, they're part of the property taxes. So at the end of the day, it's up to the property owner to determine how those assessments are split up over tenants, whether the property owner takes the assessment upon themselves, or how it's levied between commercial, second floor office space, residential, and tenants that are comprised of part of their property. So the assessments that you're seeing up here are for the properties themselves. So, like Wayne Co's property at Robin Ross and the leather shop at 6769 South Orange Avenue, at $152 first year assessments being split over 2 businesses, presumably $70 to $80 per property. This is just a sampling of the businesses. It's a pretty easy formula to calculate if you know your own total valuation. If you're interested to know what the assessment would be for your property based on the current model budget, you're welcome to email downtown@southorange.org, and we can provide those numbers for you. These sample assessment grids and the budgets, in addition to copies of the maps, will also be posted on the website following the meeting this evening or first thing tomorrow morning at southorange.org/downtown. Let's turn it back over to Denise.